In this lesson, we're going to begin our coverage of the basic leveraged buyout model. Now, to explain exactly what a leveraged buyout model is, why we use it, why a private equity firm might actually complete a leveraged buyout, what I like to normally do is go back to the analogy that we've been using throughout the course, which is comparing buying a company to buying a house. Now, when we started off with this analogy, we said that with a company, you have the concepts of equity value and enterprise value, which with a house correspond to the list price of the house, and then the enterprise value corresponds to how much you're actually paying. So the true price of the house, once you factor in repairs and other expenses and other assets like furniture that may come with the house that you've not taken into account with the list price. Then we said that with the merger model, there are three ways to buy a company. You have cash, stock, and debt. Cash with a house corresponds to a down payment. With stock, it corresponds to selling your existing house. And then debt corresponds to the mortgage. And with the merger model, we looked at these three methods of purchase in the context of what happens at immediately the moment of the transaction. With a leveraged buyout model, we're going to go beyond this, and we're going to say, okay, we know that the list price of the house is the equity value, we know enterprise value is how much they're actually paying, and we know there are these three methods of purchasing a house. But now, let's go beyond the initial moment, and let's look at what happens 5 years into the future once they have owned the company or house for a while, and then they actually go and sell it. What kind of return on their investment will they get? How will their financials be affected and impacted over 5 years? And what will everything look like at some point into the future? And so what happens in an LBO model like this is that a private equity firm buys a company using cash and debt. So in our analogy here, we are basically eliminating this one, stock, selling your existing house, because for a private equity firm, they cannot sell their own stock because they're often not even public companies, and they're just not normal companies, so they can't really sell any of their own stock. So really their two options here are cash, the down payment, and debt, taking on a mortgage. And the private equity firm's goal with buying a company like this is to earn a high return. And the way they're going to do this is by financing the purchase partially with cash and then partially with debt. So going back to the house analogy, let's say that you're driving by and you see a house on sale for $500,000. And what you decide to do is put down a down payment of $100,000 and then a mortgage of $400,000. So effectively, you're putting down $100,000 of your own cash and you're raising $400,000 worth of debt. So what's going to happen here is that over time, over each year here, you're going to be paying off some of this debt. So you initially start with $400,000 right here, but then after year 2, maybe you have $350,000 left, and then $300,000, and then $250,000, and then $200,000, and then $150,000 after you've already owned this house for 5 years. And so what you decide to do at the end of this period, after you have raised the $400,000 worth of debt and then paid off $50,000 worth each year, is at the very end you decide to go and actually sell the house. And assuming that house prices have been increasing here, we can go in and sell this house for $600,000, we'll say, at the end of this 5-year period. So what this means is that when you go and sell it, if you think about how much cash you're actually going to get back here, it's the $600,000 minus the $150,000 of mortgage that is still outstanding. And so you get back $450,000 in cash. Remember that you put down $100,000 of your down payment up front, and you're getting back $450,000 right here. So just thinking about the return here, if we just do some basic math, 450,000 divided by the 100,000, so you're getting about a 4.5x return on your initial investment. And the example that we just went through here of buying a house, paying down the mortgage each year by 50,000 as we did right here, and then selling it at the end for hopefully a higher amount, this is exactly what private equity firms do when they go and buy companies. And this is really the basic concept behind a leveraged buyout model. The PE firm goes in and puts down a so-called down payment in the form of their own cash, and then they raise debt, which was our mortgage here, and then they pay off some of the debt each year, and then at the end, they go in and sell the company, they repay any debt that's owed, and then they hopefully earn a high return on their investment at the end of the period. So that's really all an LBO model is. It's just like when you buy a house, you take on a mortgage, you pay it down each year, and then at the end, you go and sell it to someone else and hopefully get some kind of good return on your investment. One point that's really important here to understand is why we need to use leverage and why PE firms use leverage in the first place. And the reason why PE firms use leverage here is because it boosts their return. To illustrate this firsthand, let's say that we were not using leverage here. Let's say that we were not using leverage at all, and so we paid $500,000 in cash, and then we sold it in year 5 for $600,000. So we get $600,000 in cash at the end of year 5, and we initially paid $500,000. Well, in this scenario, if you think about the math here, we only get a 1.2x return. So by using leverage, we boost our return by around 3 to 4 times. And that's why leverage is so important. Because here, in this scenario, when we pay in cash all up front, that's us fronting the entire lump sum in cash. Whereas if we're only paying $100,000 of our own money, it's much easier to earn a good return on $100,000 versus earning a high return on $500,000. And so that's why leverage is so important. Now with PE firms and companies, it's on a much larger scale, but this is the basic idea. You're always using leverage because it's going to boost your returns significantly, and because without it, it would be almost impossible to get a good return on this type of investment. So that's the basic idea behind a leverage buyout model. It's just like buying a house, paying down a mortgage over time, and then selling the house at the end of a period. Coming up in the next set of videos, we're going to be looking at the basic assumptions that we need for an LBO model. And in many cases, they're going to be similar to some of the assumptions that we saw here for the merger model. So the assumptions are going to be similar, but we're going to go over them and explain how they're different, some of the new items that we need to take into account with the LBO model, and then we'll be getting started with actually creating the model, making some of our projections, and then calculating the return on investment.